The correct term is just a back rib. The loin back comes from the spine, the spears come from the side, and bacon comes from the front. So it's the back of the hog all the way around. So spears and baby backs are right next to each other. Baby means nothing. It's not a smaller pig or anything. It's actually a marketing term from Denmark in the 60s. So it really doesn't mean much. When I'm selecting, I'm looking for the weight on I like loin backs. They're called loin backs because they're typically more than 3 pounds. And right next to this is the loin, and the way they trim it has more meat on it. So it's a heavier rib. So the first success is look at the weight of the ribs when you buy them. Don't buy baby backs that are like 1.5 pounds. They're going to be tiny, not much meat, and you're going to pay a lot of money for them.
What poundage did you say to buy?
Where's loin back?
Life or Less provided these. I buy a lot of my competition pork at Sam's. Premium Standard Farms is a brand that I use a lot. The key is to look at the label and buy ribs that are not enhanced. Under USDA laws, they will have to put on the label if they've injected them with solution. And just like the turkeys you buy have 8%, 12% solution added, if you get ribs with that, what they'll do is because of the salt in the solution, you'll get a hammy taste. And you go, why was that hammy taste? And the pork is where ham comes from, and it's just because they put a lot of salt on it. So when you go to the store, they'll be in a plastic pack. If you've never compared and contrasted, there's a spare rib. This is a full spare rib. I'm going to show you how to cut this down to a St. Louis, which is what we compete with. So I'm going to take this and this and turn it into that. And I'll show you exactly how we did it. The toughest thing people hear about is called the membrane on the back.
That's not
It's actually part of the skeletal structure, and what it does, it holds the meat to the bones. But in the cooking world, the barbecue world, we like to take that membrane off because it's rather impermeable, and so rubs won't penetrate. The videos on the site will have more up-close information. But basically, I take a fingernail, and once it warms up to room temperature, it gets a little hard to pull. Cold ribs will separate easier. This is one of those that's hard to show you in the audience. You see if the spares come off easier. No.
Spears are usually a little easier.
So the membrane is this papery substance. If you've ever had ribs in a restaurant, that's the membrane, and it won't allow the rub to penetrate. So a little practice, you can get that off and then season them up. You don't have to take it off. It's not an absolute. The way I teach barbecue, there's no absolute rules. Do what works for you. So the key, I'm not going to over trim this. If I was going to trim this up, the most I would do is trim off these stringy bits because they're going to dry out. Use your eyes and think about presentation, just like you see on the Food Network and things like that. Eat with your eyes, so make sure it looks pretty to start with. You'll get a better end product.
Russ, direct or indirect heat source? Indirect.
For smoking, I use indirect. And, right, so I'll talk about cooking here in just a second. Now, another thing to do, barbecue guy, is the tools. This is called a scimitar. It's a very sharp knife, but any sharp knife will help you barbecue. A dull knife is actually more dangerous because you work harder. So any knife will do as long as it's sharp. I'll show you what I'm doing after I do it. I'm trimming off this part of the bone because it's just not going to cook up well.
Yep.
Keep in mind what I'm going to do. I'm going to trim this up so that it looks good to get you that shape. That fat line right there, that's basically where I'm going to cut. There are other ways to do it. If you line it up with the edge of your cutting board,
Very. Very sharp. Saying it was sharp, I think, was an understatement.
so now I've taken that rather awkward rack and I've squared it off. So this is going to cook more evenly, more consistent. This is the piece I cut off. There's a little bit of cartilage here. This is almost all meat. Season it up, put it on the smoker at the same time. It'll cook up. Cut it into bite-sized pieces, cover it in sauce, and you have some rib tips, they're called. A lot of the seasonings that I used for today, both the rubs and sauces, are made in Oklahoma. I didn't want to try to teach you in like 2 minutes how to make your own rub. But there are a lot of world-class barbecue teams here in Oklahoma. I can think of at least 12 teams in Oklahoma that are world champions. So we have a pretty tough crowd here. A lot of them use local products. They'll be on the website. Coach Shack sponsors me on the circuit. They make some real good rubs I'll talk about for brisket. David Butcher Barbecue, he's up in Chandler. He has a line. If you like sweet ribs, he's got a honey rub that I use on these ribs, so you'll be able to taste them. A lot of questions in class are, what is a rub? A rub is just you can buy in commercial dry ingredients. The one thing I would look for, there's some here in the store you can try. If you go in the grocery store, always read the label. You want to know what the first ingredient is. It's either going to be salt or sugar. And keep that in mind because as you start seasoning, what's your predominant flavor going to be? So salt, pork, like salt, so salt rubs work well on pork, but maybe it doesn't cook out or it overcompensates. So read the labels, get used to it, try it. It's going to taste different in your hand than it's going to taste on the end product. And just keep some good notes. But rubbing is real simple. That's right. I'll season one up for you and show you what it looks like. I start on the back just because I know it's going to go backside down. I use my hand and even out the coating. I will apply the rub for pork. I don't typically apply the rub more than an hour before. If you do it overnight, if there's any salt in there, you'll start curing it, and that's where that hammy taste will come. Now, beef you can cure longer with salt, but pork I never recommend more than an hour or two. It's just going to be too much. And that's what it looks like rubbed. You notice I didn't put any glue down like mustard or any water or anything like that. If I let this sit here a minute or two, it'll actually start drawing out moisture and it'll start looking very liquid. That's because the salt in there draws that moisture out and it'll adhere to it. I'll let that sit for an hour. Then I put it in the smoker, typical temperature in the 225, 275 range. This size and that size of spare rib will typically be done in the 3.5 to 4.5 hour range. The number one tip, if you want to be a good rib cook, you come to my class. I've had competitors. This is the secret. So if you want a competition secret, I'm going to teach you something to take home. They hate me in class when I show them how simple this is because they pay to come to class and you hear it tonight and you're going to go, what? It's a toothpick. How many of you are bread bakers? I learned this trick. I came up with this in the barbecue world. The idea is, just like you poke it into bread, you're trying to see if anything comes out. What I'm doing with the rib is I'm poking it between the two bones into the meat and I'm feeling the resistance. The reason why this will get you more consistency The typical method of testing ribs is to take a pair of tongs from the end, and what's called the bend test. Well, how much bend or how little bend? Some will swear that you want to look for the pullback, where the meat pulls back. Both of those methods are not consistent. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. The toothpick test with a little practice will show you what tenderness is. You'll feel the tenderness. That's how I finish those off. Cook that for that period of time. Now, in the smoker, I would do the finishing sauce. The finishing sauce is real simple. There's a little secret. I use apple jelly. I'm using it to give it that sheen, that glisten that you saw. Take any barbecue sauce you want and just add apple jelly to it. So the gelatin in there is going to break down in the sauce and give you that shine, and it just finishes up real well. A finishing sauce isn't like you get in a restaurant where they coat it in sauce. Because we put rub on there, we don't want to hide that flavor. We want to enhance that flavor. So the finishing sauce, this has been sitting there, but it's very thin. You can see that it's about the consistency of water. Just thin enough that it puts a thin coat. So if we get some, is your food ready yet? Well, mine may be ready before yours. Rib questions. We're gonna have a few. So the question was, do I spray? The question is like moths, things like that. While it's cooking, I'll spray with cherry juice for appearance. That red color. I also cook pork with cherry because I like that red color in the wood will actually color the pork a little bit. So those are some tips. If you just take a spray bottle, what I suggest you use, if you use apple juice or cherry juice, anything like that, buy the concentrate and don't add water. Don't buy a big bottle of apple juice that's 99% water. Take the frozen concentrate and spray with just that. That's all your flavor. Don't add water to it because water will actually evaporate and dry it out. Good question.
When do you put the finishing rub on?
Once I've determined that they're done with the toothpick, I put it on right then, and it doesn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes to finish it off. Yeah, because all I'm doing is it's attacking. So if you touch it with your finger and it starts pulling off the sauce, it's ready. More questions? Anything goes. No questions?
Just an update. Here at American Propane, we've run out of propane on the DCS. So we're back up and running though. We're heated again, so we should have more pinwheels in a minute. So just in case anybody's wondering why if they were being excluded from something, it was nothing like that. Hey, the good news is we're at propane, so membership has its privileges. That's right. This is the place to run out of propane. But anyway, so we'll have ribs and pork coming out momentarily.
Yeah, let me tell you about this slaw. This is a roasted corn avocado slaw. I love coleslaw. I love avocados. I love roasted corn. All those things. But just throw them all there together. Let's see how it turns out. So pretty simple stuff. Roasted it was 3 ears of corn, 2 heads of green cabbage, a little bit of red cabbage. There is a little bit of red jalapeno in there for a little kick. Some fresh garlic mashed with salt, lemon juice, and that's about it. So we'll have some of that out too. All right. Mark has taken over the grill. We're back up and running. So have you got ribs ready to roll?
I'm getting ready to cook another right now.
Okay. So and yeah, I also will have some. I mentioned I was going to do baked beans, and I tested out some baked beans last weekend. They were all right. Nothing to really think about. I'm from Texas. We don't do baked beans with barbecue. My mom makes great baked beans, but they were always with hamburgers or hot dogs, stuff like that. We eat ranch style beans, something with a little kick. So I've got some, I'm calling them vaquero beans, or buckaroo beans, we're going to call them that. The word buckaroo comes from the Spanish word vaquero, which means cowboy. And when we first moved into Mexico, we couldn't say vaquero, so we said buckaroo. So This is more of a buckaroo bean since it's my interpretation. It's got some red chili, some pinto beans, and some garlic and onions and all kinds of good stuff.